Welcome, dear listener, to another quiet journey through time. Tonight, we invite you to settle into comfort, to let the weight of the day slip away, and to drift with us across centuries and oceans. We are going back to a moment when the world was about to change. Not through grand intention, but through simple, exhausted confusion. Close your eyes if you wish. Breathe slowly. Let us begin. The year is 1492, though the exact date matters less than the feeling of that time. Christopher Columbus stands on the deck of a wooden ship, and he is tired. Not the tired that comes from a single sleepless night, but the tired that seeps into bones after months at sea. His body moves with the rhythm of waves without thinking. His eyes scan horizons out of habit, not hope. Columbus is not trying to find a new continent. This is important to understand. In his mind, he is sailing toward the Indies, toward the spice markets of Asia, toward wealth and validation. He has convinced the Spanish crown to fund this voyage with promises of gold and trade routes. But now, weeks into the journey, doubt has become his constant companion. The maps he carries feel less like guides and more like wishes. The three ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, creak and groan as they push through Atlantic waters. These are not grand vessels. They are merchant ships, workhorses of the sea, built for cargo and durability rather than exploration or glory. The wood is dark with salt and age. The sails are patched in places. Everything smells of tar, damp rope, and the bodies of men who have not bathed in weeks. Columbus paces the deck in the hours before dawn, when the world is nothing but shades of grey and black. He watches his crew sleep in awkward positions, curled against barrels and coiled rope. Some of them snore softly. Others lie perfectly still, conserving energy. They are tired too. Not just physically tired, but tired in their spirits. Tired of the endless sameness of water and sky. Tired of trusting a man whose confidence seems increasingly fragile. The sailors come from ports across Spain and Portugal. Some are experienced seamen, men who have spent more of their lives on water than land. Others are desperate, running from debts or crimes or simply from the grinding poverty of late medieval Europe. They signed on for promises of payment and perhaps adventure, but now they have only uncertainty. Each day that passes without sight of land weighs heavier than the last. Morning comes slowly, as it always does at sea. The sun does not rise dramatically. It simply makes the eastern sky less dark, then gradually lighter until the world becomes visible again. The process takes an hour or more, and during that time, the men wake quietly, stretching stiff limbs, checking rigging, beginning the small maintenance tasks that fill every day on a wooden ship. There is always something that needs mending, always rope that needs adjusting. Columbus holds a compass in his weathered hands, studying it as though it might reveal secrets beyond simple direction. The needle points, as it always does, but lately he has begun to notice something strange. The needle does not point exactly where it should. The variation is small, subtle, but it nags at him. Is the compass faulty? Or is something else happening, something he does not understand about the nature of the earth itself? He checks his charts again, unrolling them carefully on a wooden table in his cabin. The maps are beautiful in their way, drawn with elaborate care, decorated with sea monsters and compass roses. But they are also incomplete, based on theories and ancient texts rather than actual exploration. The western edge of these maps simply ends, or loops back around, or fills with speculation. No one knows what lies out here. No one has sailed this far west and returned to tell about it. The wind changes subtly, and Columbus feels it before he sees it. Years at sea have taught him to read the air, to sense shifts in pressure and temperature. He walks to the stern and looks at the sky. Clouds are forming in the east, moving faster than they should. The color of the water has changed too, from deep blue to something darker, something that suggests depth and power. A storm is coming. He calls to his officers, not with alarm, but with calm instruction. The crew begins preparing, moving with practiced efficiency. They secure loose items, reef the sails partially, check that barrels and supplies are tied down. Everyone knows what to do. Storms are not rare at sea. They are simply part of the bargain one makes with the ocean. You accept its moods in exchange for passage. The storm arrives in the early afternoon, though time becomes difficult to measure once the rain begins. The sky darkens to a bruised purple grey. The wind strengthens from a breeze to a force that tears at clothing and makes speech nearly impossible. The ships begin to pitch more violently, climbing waves and sliding into troughs. Water comes over the rails, soaking everyone, turning the deck into a dangerous, slippery surface. The men hold on to whatever they can find. Columbus has weathered storms before, but this one feels different. It does not pass quickly. It does not ease after an hour or two. Instead, it settles in, as though it plans to stay. The rain comes in sheets, so thick that visibility drops to almost nothing. The three ships lose sight of each other, each one alone in the grey chaos. The Nina and Pinta become ghosts, invisible beyond 100 feet of rain and spray. Night falls, though the darkness is barely different from the day. The wind howls through the rigging, a sound like voices crying out in an unknown language. The ship shudders with each wave, would groaning under stress. Columbus stays on deck, soaked to the skin, his hands gripping rope until they go numb. He cannot steer the storm away. He can only endure it, and hope that the ship holds together and trust that somewhere beyond this chaos, the world still exists. The crew prays, some of them openly, calling to saints and to the Virgin Mary, promising offerings and better lives if they survive. Others pray silently, lips moving without sound. Religion is not optional in this era. It is woven into every aspect of life, especially life at the edge of survival. God and the sea are both vast, powerful, and utterly indifferent to human plans. Both must be respected and feared in equal measure. By the second day of the storm, exhaustion has replaced fear. The men move mechanically, bailing water, adjusting rigging, doing whatever small tasks might keep the ship afloat. No one talks about what happens if the ship breaks apart. Everyone knows. The ocean does not leave survivors. It is too cold, too vast, too empty, to fall panically, perhaps quickly, slowly not. Columbus stops, checking his compass. It no longer matters which direction they are travelling. The storm pushes them where it wills, and they have no choice but to accept it. The carefully planned route is abandoned. The calculations and charts are useless. They are no longer navigating. They are simply surviving, 1 hour at a time, one wave at a time. Control has become an illusion they can no longer afford to maintain. On the third day, the wind begins to ease. Not all at once, but gradually, in subtle increments. The waves remain high, but the chaos lessens. The rain thins to a drizzle, then stops. Clouds break apart, revealing patches of blue sky that seem impossibly bright after so much grey. The men look up at these patches as though seeing heaven itself. Some of them weep quietly, from relief or exhaustion or both. When the sea finally calms, Columbus attempts to determine their position. He takes measurements with his astrolabe, checking the height of the sun at noon. He consults his charts and tries to plot where the storm might have pushed them. The calculations do not make sense. According to his reckoning, they should have reached the Indies by now, or at least sighted some island chain. But there is nothing. Only empty ocean, in every direction. The crew is hungry, thirsty, and beginning to mutter among themselves. Provisions are running lower than planned because the storm lasted longer than expected. The water casks are less than half full. The hardtack is mouldy but still edible. The salted meat is tough and salty enough to make throats burn. Meals have become joyless, mechanical acts of keeping the body functioning. No one has energy for conversation during meals anymore. Columbus calls a meeting with his officers, the captains of the other two ships, having rejoined the formation now that the weather has cleared. They speak in low voices in his cabin, studying the maps and charts, trying to make sense of where they are. The Pinzon brothers, who captain the Nina and Pinta, express doubt. Martin Alonso Pinzon, the Morphos, they turn turtle hay supplies. The crew is close to mutiny, he says. They have sailed farther west than any Europeans in recorded history, and they have found nothing. Columbus refuses to turn back. Not out of courage exactly, but out of a more complicated mixture of pride, stubbornness, and fear of returning empty-handed to the Spanish court. He has promised them a route to Asia. He has staked his reputation, his credibility, his entire future on this voyage. To return now with nothing but storms who admit complete failure. He cannot bear that thought. So he convinces his officers to continue west, just a few more days, just a little farther. The ships sail on, moving through water that seems endless and unchanging. The men fall into a kind of trance, performing their duties without thought, eating without tasting, sleeping without dreaming. Time becomes strange. Days blur together. The sun rises and sets, marking time without meaning. They are suspended between the world they left and whatever world might lie ahead, belonging fully to neither. The days after the storm settle into a rhythm that is both comforting and unsettling. The wind returns, but gently now, filling the sails with steady pressure that pushes the ships westward at a pace that feels neither fast nor slow. The ocean has become calm, almost unnaturally so. The surface reflects the sky like polished glass, broken only by the wakes of the three ships cutting through the water. It is beautiful in a way that makes the men uneasy. Columbus stands at the rail each morning and watches the sun rise over the eastern horizon behind them. He is watching the old world recede, though he does not think of it in those terms. To him, they are simply sailing toward Asia by a new route. But something in the quality of the light has changed. The air tastes different, feels different on the skin. He cannot name what has changed, only that something has. The crew has stopped asking when they will arrive. The question no longer seems to have meaning. Instead, they focus on the immediate tasks of sailing, the endless small labors that keep wooden ships functional. They mend sails with thick needles and coarse thread, their fingers developing calluses upon calluses. They splice rope, weaving the hemp fibers back together when strands fray or break. They scrape barnacles from the hull during calm moments, leaning over the side to reach the waterline. Food has become simpler, more basic. The meals now consist of hardtack, a biscuit baked so hard it can last for months without spoiling, though it often becomes home to weevils. The men tap the biscuits against the deck before eating, knocking out the small insects, then eat anyway. Protein is protein. There is also dried fish, so heavily salted that it must be soaked in fresh water before it can be chewed. The water itself tastes of wood and algae, drawn from casks that have been sealed for weeks. The men eat in silence mostly, sitting in small groups on the deck, chewing slowly. Conversation requires energy they prefer to conserve. When they do speak, it is in short sentences. Observations about the weather or the ship or memories of home that feel increasingly distant and unreal. One man talks about his wife's cooking. describing the smell of bread baking in detail that makes the others close their eyes. Another talks about the tavern near the docks in Polis, the dark interior and the taste of wine that did not come from a barrel stored at sea. Sleep becomes deeper and stranger. The men sleep where they can find space, curled into corners, wedged between cargo, sometimes in hammocks strung below deck. The motion of the ship rocks them constantly, a gentle swaying that never stops. Some find this soothing, like being rocked in a cradle. Others find it maddening, a reminder that they are never still, never on solid ground. Dreams become vivid and odd, filled with water and endless horizons, with the sensation of falling or flying. Columbus himself sleeps fitfully, in short intervals, never more than a few hours at a time. He wakes often in the night and comes on deck to check the stars, to verify their course, to reassure himself that they are still moving in the right direction. The stars have become his only reliable guides. The compass still shows that strange variation. The maps have become useless. But the stars, at least, remain constant, wheeling overhead in their eternal patterns. He has begun to notice that some stars are different now. Constellations he knew from European skies have shifted position. Some have disappeared below the northern horizon. New stars, unfamiliar patterns, have emerged in the south. This troubles him more than he admits to his crew. It suggests they have travelled farther than he calculated, or perhaps in a direction he did not intend. The sky itself is telling him that he is lost, though he refuses to accept this conclusion. The days grow warmer. This is subtle at first, barely noticeable, but over the course of a week it becomes undeniable. The air temperature rises. The sun feels stronger, more direct. The men remove layers of clothing, going about their work in lighter shirts, some stripped to the waist. Their skin darkens, tanned by constant exposure to sun and wind. Their faces become lined and weathered, aged beyond their years by the harsh conditions. Birds appear, flying low over the water. This excites the crew tremendously, for birds suggest land, suggest that the endless ocean might actually end somewhere. The men point and shout when they spot the birds, calling to each other, straining to see if the birds are flying in any particular direction. Columbus notes the birds carefully in his log, describing their appearance, their behavior, trying to determine what species they might be and what this might mean about proximity to land. But the birds disappear again, and no land follows. This happens several times, raising and then crushing hope. The men grow quieter after each false alarm. They learn not to get excited too quickly. They learn to accept that the ocean might continue forever, that land might be a concept they have imagined, something that no longer exists in this watery world they now inhabit. The three ships maintain formation, sailing close enough to remain visible to each other, but far enough apart to avoid collision. At night, they hang lanterns, small points of light in the vast darkness. These lights become enormously important to the crews. Proof that they are not alone, that other humans exist somewhere in the void. The sailors watch these lanterns obsessively, checking throughout the night that the other ships are still there, still moving, still real. Communication between the ships happens through signals, flags by day and lantern patterns by night. The messages are simple. All is well, reduce sail, danger spotted, maintain course. There is no way to have conversations across the water, no way to share fears or doubts or philosophical musings. Each ship is its own small world, connected to the others but fundamentally isolated, alone with its own thoughts and worries. Time becomes foggy, difficult to track. Columbus maintains a log, carefully recording each day's progress, but even he begins to lose track of dates. Was it Tuesday or Wednesday? How many weeks since they left the Canary Islands? The days blend together into a continuous present tense, a state of perpetual now. Past and future become abstract concepts. There is only the ship, the sea, the sky, and the slow movement west. The men stop talking about home in specific terms. They no longer say, "When I get back I will do this or that." The certainty has drained from such statements. Instead, they talk about home as a dream, a place that might have existed once, but feels increasingly mythical. Spain becomes like Atlantis, a story people tell, a place that might or might not be real. The only reality is the ship, the work, the water. Direction becomes meaningless in a practical sense. Yes, they are sailing west, following the compass and the setting sun. But wests toward what? West for how long? The concept of destination has dissolved. They are not traveling to somewhere. They are simply traveling, the journey itself becoming the entire purpose and meaning of their existence. Movement is all. The act of sailing has replaced the goal of arrival. Only movement remains. The ships glide through water that seems bottomless. Sometimes, in the clearest moments, looking over the side. The men can see down into the blue depths. See the light fading into darker and darker blue until it becomes black, impenetrable. The ocean is miles deep here, though they have no way to measure it. They are floating on top of an abyss, separated from the crushing depths only by wooden planks and tar. This realization hits different men at different times, usually at night, usually when alone. The understanding of how small they are, how vulnerable, how utterly dependent on the ship's continued integrity. One plank splits, one seam opens, and the ocean pours in. The ship sinks. The men die. The ocean continues, indifferent and eternal. This thought is terrifying, but also strangely calming. Their survival is not up to them. They have done everything they can. Now they simply exist and wait and trust. The wind shifts slightly, coming now from the northeast rather than due east. This is good for sailing, but confusing for navigation. Columbus adjusts the sails, trying to maintain a westward course, but the ships drift slightly south. He notes this in his log, but does not worry excessively. A few degrees of variation over hundreds of miles will not matter much, he tells himself. Though part of him wonders if it might matter enormously, if those few degrees might be the difference between finding land and sailing past it into empty ocean forever. Dolphins appear one morning, dozens of them leaping and playing in the bow waves of the ships. The men crowd the rails to watch, pointing and laughing, delighted by the display. The dolphins seem impossibly joyful, their sleek bodies arcing through the air. Splashing back into the water, racing alongside the ships as though competing. For a few minutes, the crew forgets their exhaustion and fear. They are children again, watching something beautiful and inexplicable. The dolphins stay with them for hours, then vanish as suddenly as they appeared, diving deep and not returning. The men return to their work, but something has shifted. The dolphins have reminded them that life exists in this empty ocean, that they are not alone on a dead world. Something lives here, thrives here even. This thought is comforting in a way that is difficult to articulate. At night, the ocean sometimes glows. Phosphorescence in the water, tiny organisms lighting up when disturbed, creates trails of blue-green light behind the ships. The men watch this phenomenon with awe bordering on fear. Some see it as magic, as proof that the ocean is enchanted. Others see it as a natural wonder they do not understand but can appreciate. Columbus, educated and well-read, knows it is some property of sea life, but even he finds it beautiful and mysterious. The stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns. Columbus identifies Polaris, the North Star, and uses it to confirm their latitude. They are far south of Spain now, he realizes, much farther south than he intended to be. This troubles him, But he also notices that the southern stars are brighter here, more numerous. The night sky is richer, fuller, as though they have crossed into a region where the heavens are more generous with their light. Oui, Kiksbus. Or perhaps only days. Time has lost its clear edges. The men exist in a state between waking and sleeping, between past and future, between the known world and whatever lies beyond. They are in transition, crossing not just an ocean, but some boundary that cannot be marked on any map. They are leaving behind everything they knew and moving toward everything they cannot imagine. The morning arrives like any other morning. The sun climbing slowly above the eastern horizon, turning the sky from black to grey to pale blue. The men wake and begin their routines without enthusiasm, without expectation. Another day of water and sky, another day of sailing toward nothing. They move through their tasks mechanically, checking rigging, adjusting sails, scanning the empty horizon out of habit rather than hope. But today is different. A sailor named Rodrigo de Triana, standing watch in the pre-dawn darkness, sees something. At first, he thinks it is a cloud low on the western horizon, darker than the sky around it. He watches it for several minutes, waiting for it to dissipate or move, but it remains stationary. His heart begins to beat faster. He stares until his eyes ache, trying to be certain before he raises alarm, before he gives the others false hope again. Then the sun rises higher, and the light changes, and suddenly he is sure. It is not a cloud. It is land. The dark mass has texture, has solidity. He can see variations in the shadow, suggesting hills or trees or something substantial. He opens his mouth and shouts, his voice cracking from weeks of silence and salt air. Land, he cries. Land ahead. Tierra, tierra. The word echoes across the deck, reaching sleeping men who jolt awake, reaching Columbus in his cabin. The crew rushes to the rail, everyone trying to see at once, pointing and shouting and asking if it is real, if it might be another illusion, another trick of light and desperate hope. But it is real. As the sun climbs higher and the light improves, the land becomes unmistakable. There is a coastline ahead, perhaps 10 or 15 miles distant, a dark line separating ocean from sky. Trees are visible, their tops catching the morning light. No buildings, no smoke, no signs of civilization, but land, solid earth, the first they have seen in over a month. The ships do not rush toward the shore. They maintain their steady pace, approaching carefully. Columbus orders soundings taken, a weighted line dropped to measure depth. The ocean floor has been too deep to measure for weeks, the line running out without touching bottom. But now, as they near the coast, the soundings begin to register. 30 fathoms, then 20, then 15. The ocean is becoming shallower. They are approaching a continental shelf, though they do not have that term yet. They only know that the bottom is rising to meet them. The land grows more distinct with each passing hour. The coastline is irregular, curving, dotted with what appear to be small islands or sandbars. The vegetation is dense, tropical, nothing like the forests of Spain. The trees are strange shapes, some very tall with thin trunks and leaves clustered at the top like bursts of green fire. Others are broad and low, spreading horizontally rather than reaching upward. Vines connect trees to each other, creating walls of green. Columbus stands at the bow, studying the approaching shore with intense concentration. This is not what he expected. Asia, in his imagination, would have cities visible from the sea, ports, ships, signs of the great civilizations he has read about. Marco Polo's writings described grand palaces, sophisticated architecture, bustling trade centers. But this coast shows none of that. It looks wild, untouched, pristine. No docks, no buildings, No evidence of human presence at all. He consults his charts again, trying to reconcile what he sees with what should be there. According to his calculations, they should have reached the eastern coast of Asia, should be approaching the outlying islands of the Indies. But nothing matches. The coast runs in the wrong direction. The vegetation is unfamiliar. The whole scene feels wrong, like arriving at a destination only to discover it is somewhere else entirely. Confusion settles over him like a physical weight. The ship's anchor a few hundred yards offshore, in water clear enough that they can see the sandy bottom through the blue. Fish swim below them, bright flashes of colour, species they do not recognize. The water itself is warmer than any ocean water they have known, almost pleasant, a shock after the cold Atlantic. The air temperature is warm, humid, carrying scents of earth and vegetation, of growing things and decay, the smell of life concentrated and intense. No one rushes to go ashore. After weeks of dreaming about land, now that it is here, the men hesitate. The shore looks peaceful, beautiful even, but also alien, unknown. What dangers might wait in those trees? What animals? What diseases? What hostile people? They have no information, no way to know if stepping onto that beach will be safe or fatal. Columbus must give direct orders before men volunteer to take the small boat to shore. A party is selected, 8 men including Columbus himself. They climb down into the ship's boat, a small wooden craft that rocks alarmingly after the stability of the larger ship. The sailors row toward the beach, pulling the oars in steady rhythm. The only sound the splash of wood entering and leaving water. The distance is short, but the approach seems to take forever, each stroke bringing them closer to this unknown place. The boat's bottom scrapes sand, a grinding sound that is startlingly loud in the quiet morning. Columbus steps out first, into water that comes to his knees, warm and clear. He wades the last few feet to the beach, feeling sand beneath his boots, solid ground for the first time in more than a month. He expects to feel triumph, relief, joy. Instead, he feels nothing but confusion. This place does not fit into his idea of the world. The beach is white sand, fine ice powder stretching in both directions, as far as they can see. The tree line is perhaps 50 feet from the water's edge, a wall of green that seems impenetrable. Birds call from within the trees, strange sounds, not like European birds. Some calls are musical, melodic. Others are harsh, almost mechanical. The overall effect is of a place very much alive, filled with creatures they cannot see, watching them from the shadows. Columbus plants a flag in the sand, the banner of Castile and Leon, red and gold cloth, hanging limply in the humid air. He performs the formal ceremony of claiming this land for the Spanish crown, speaking the words that make this place legally part of Spain's dominion. But the words feel hollow, almost absurd. Spoken on this empty beach with no witnesses except his own men and whatever watchers from the forest. How can he claim what he does not understand? The men fan out along the beach, exploring cautiously. They find shells, some familiar, some utterly strange. They find pieces of driftwood worn smooth by water and time. They find strange plants growing near the tree line, low bushes with thick leaves, grasses with sharp edges. Flowers in colours they have never seen. Everything is slightly wrong, slightly off, like a version of reality that has been translated poorly from one language to another. No one wants to enter the forest. The shadows between the trees are too deep, too concealing. Strange sounds echo from within. Something large moves through the underbrush, invisible but audible, crashing through vegetation. The men grip their weapons, swords and crossbows, but they do not pursue. They have not come here to fight unknown creatures. They have come to find Asia, to establish trade, not to explore jungles that should not exist. Columbus walks the beach alone, away from his men, trying to think. This land does not match any map, does not correspond to any description he has read. The trees are wrong. The sand is wrong. The very air feels wrong, too thick, too warm, too full of moisture. He has sailed west to reach east, but he has arrived somewhere else entirely. Somewhere that exists outside of geography, outside of knowledge. He does not have words for what he is feeling. Awas bas. The sun climbs higher, becoming oppressively hot. The men retreat to the shade of palm trees, marveling at the strange plants, the enormous fronds that provide shelter from the sun. They drink from their water casks, not trusting the fresh water they can hear running somewhere in the forest. They eat hardtack and dried fish, familiar foods in this unfamiliar place, small anchors to reality. Then, in the early afternoon, they see people, not emerging from the forest, but appearing further down the beach, walking along the sand. The figures are distant, perhaps half a mile away, difficult to see clearly in the bright light and heat shimmer. Columbus counts perhaps a dozen individuals, moving slowly, not approaching, but not fleeing either. Simply present, observing from a distance. The Spanish sailors freeze, hands moving to weapons, uncertain how to react. These people are not dressed like Asians from Marco Polo's descriptions. They are not wearing the silks and elaborate robes of Chinese merchants. They are nearly naked, their skin darker than any Spaniards, their hair long and black. They carry no visible weapons, no flags, no signs of civilization as Europeans understand the term. They are simply people, watching the strangers who have arrived on their shore. Columbus wants to approach, to make contact, to establish communication and trade relations. But something stops him. Perhaps it is the uncertainty in the eyes of his men. Perhaps it is his own confusion about where they are. Perhaps it is simply exhaustion, the accumulated weight of weeks at sea, of storms and doubt and the slow erosion of certainty. He raises a hand in greeting, a simple gesture that needs no language. The distant figures do not respond, do not move closer or further away. They simply watch. The two groups observe each other across the expanse of white sand, separated by distance and by something far greater than distance. They are separated by completely different understandings of the world, by languages that have no common roots, by histories that have never intersected, by the simple fact that neither group knows the other exists. This moment is extraordinary, but it does not feel extraordinary. It feels quiet, uncertain, almost anticlimactic. No one speaks. On the Spanish side, the men wait for Columbus to give orders, to tell them what to do, how to interpret this situation. But Columbus himself is silent, staring at the distant figures, trying to reconcile them with his expectations. These are not the sophisticated traders he hoped to meet. They are not the wealthy merchants who would buy European goods and sell spices in return. They are simply people, living on a coast that should not exist, inhabiting a world that was not supposed to be here. Eventually, as the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, the distant figures turn and walk away, disappearing into the tree line further down the beach. They do not look back. They move without hurry, without apparent fear or excitement, simply leaving. The Spanish watch them go, relieved and disappointed in equal measure. The opportunity for contact has passed, postponed to another time, another day. The ships remain anchored offshore for the night, rocking gently in the calm water. The men sleep fitfully, unused to the stillness after weeks of constant motion. The absence of deep ocean swells feels strange, almost wrong. Some men sleep on deck, preferring the open air to the cramped quarters below. They lie on their backs, looking up at stars that seem closer here, brighter, as though the sky itself has moved nearer to Earth in this strange place. Columbus does not sleep. He sits in his cabin with a candle burning, writing in his log by the flickering light. He describes the land, the beach, the trees, the distant people. But his words are careful, calculated. He does not write that he is lost. He does not write that nothing makes sense. Instead, he writes that they have reached islands off the coast of Asia, that these must be the outlying territories of the Great Khan's empire. He writes what needs to be true, not what feels true. Morning comes with bird calls that are becoming familiar now, the strange tropical songs that greet each dawn. The sun rises quickly here, faster than in Europe, leaping above the horizon rather than creeping. Within Anal the air is already warm, the humidity building, creating a heaviness that makes breathing feel like work. The men wake slowly, stretching, preparing for another day of uncertainty. Columbus decides they will go ashore again, this time with more men, with gifts to offer, with the intention of making peaceful contact if the opportunity arises. They load the small boats with items selected specifically for trade. Glass beads, small bells, bits of red cloth, knives, needles. These are trinkets, items of little value in Europe but carefully chosen for their novelty, their brightness, their potential to fascinate people who might never have seen such things. The boats reach the beach just after sunrise, when the sand is still cool, before the sun has baked it into something that burns through boot soles. The men pull the boats up onto the shore, securing them against the tide. They form a loose group, weapons visible but not drawn, trying to appear both prepared and peaceful. It is a difficult balance, this attempt to seem simultaneously strong and friendly. They do not have to wait long. Within our people begin to emerge from the forest. Not the same group from yesterday, or perhaps they are. It is impossible to tell. They come slowly, cautiously, men and women and a few children, perhaps 20 individuals total. They stop at the tree line, maintaining distance, studying the strangers with expressions that are difficult to read. Curiosity, certainly. Wariness. But not fear, not hostility. Simply careful assessment. The two groups regard each other across 50 feet of sand and the unbridgeable gap of mutual incomprehension. The Spanish sailors see people with copper-colored skin, straight black hair, bodies decorated with what might be paint or tattoos, wearing minimal clothing woven from plant fibers or made from animal hides. The local people see pale-skinned strangers wearing strange layered garments, despite the heat, carrying metal objects, emerging from impossibly large wooden structures floating on the water. Columbus steps forward slowly, making his movements obvious, non-threatening. He holds out his hands, showing they are empty, showing he carries no weapon. He speaks, though he knows they cannot understand him. He uses Spanish, then tries a few words of Latin, then a phrase or two of Arabic, languages he knows or has heard. The words mean nothing to his audience, but perhaps the tone conveys something. Perhaps the attempt itself communicates peaceful intent. One of the local men steps forward as well, moving with the same careful deliberation. He is young, perhaps 20, his body lean and muscular in the way of people who live active lives without surplus food. His face is open, intelligent, watching Columbus with intense focus. He speaks as well, words that sound nothing like any European language, sounds that use the throat and tongue in unfamiliar ways. The rhythm is different, the music of it strange but not unpleasant. They stand face to face, these two men from completely different worlds, trying to communicate across a void that language cannot bridge. Columbus gestures to himself, says his name slowly. The young man watches, processes, then gestures to himself and speaks what must be his own name. A word that Columbus cannot quite capture, cannot quite repeat correctly. They try several times, each attempting the other's name, getting closer but never quite achieving accuracy. It is awkward, frustrating, but also somehow intimate. Columbus reaches into his pocket and withdraws a small bell, brass, the size of his thumb. He holds it up, then shakes it lightly. The bell makes a clear, bright sound, ringing in the humid morning air. The young man's eyes widen slightly, the first clear expression Columbus has seen. Interest, delight, surprise. Columbus extends his hand, offering the bell. The young man hesitates, then reaches out, takes it carefully, examines it, shakes it himself. The sound makes him smile, the first smile of this encounter. This small exchange breaks something open. Other Spanish sailors come forward with their gifts, bells and beads and bits of cloth. The local people approach more closely, accepting the offerings, examining them with obvious fascination. They touch the glass beads, holding them up to the light, marveling at their transparency and colour. They ring the bells repeatedly, delighted by the sound. They feel the red cloth, rubbing it between their fingers, astonished by its texture and vivid dye. In return, they offer their own items. Woven baskets, intricate and beautiful, made from plant fibres in patterns the Spanish have never seen. Carved wooden objects, smooth and polished, shaped like animals or abstract forms. Small clay pots, fired and decorated with geometric designs. Pieces of fruit, strange varieties, some round and green, others elongated and yellow, still others small and purple. The Spanish accept these gifts cautiously, uncertain what they are receiving, but trying to match the generosity being shown. Communication happens through gestures, through pointing and miming, through repetition and guessing. The local people point to the trees and say a word. The Spanish repeat it, probably incorrectly. The Spanish point to their ship and say knave. The local people repeat it, their pronunciation transformed by unfamiliar phonemes. Neither group truly understands the other, but understanding is not the point. The point is the attempt itself, the effort being made, the goodwill being extended. A woman approaches, older than the others, her hair streaked with grey, her face lined with decades of sun and life. She carries something wrapped in large leaves. She unwraps it slowly, revealing flat bread, or something like bread, made from a grain or root the Spanish do not recognize. She breaks off peas and adds it, demonstrating that it is food, said it is safe. Then she offers pieces to the Spanish sailors, who accept hesitantly, uncertain but not wanting to give offense. The bread, if that is what it is, tastes unlike any bread they have known. It is dense, slightly sweet, with a texture that is both chewy and crumbly. It is not unpleasant, simply different, another small reminder that they are very far from home. The sailors chew slowly, swallow, smile to show appreciation. The woman smiles back, satisfied that she has fulfilled some obligation of hospitality, has welcomed these strange visitors in the traditional way. Children begin to appear, emboldened by the peaceful atmosphere. They peek out from behind trees, from between adult legs, their eyes enormous with curiosity and excitement. They stare at the Spanish sailors as though looking at creatures from myth, pointing and whispering to each other. One brave child, a girl perhaps 6 years old, approaches Columbus directly, reaches out, touches his beard. Spanish beards are impressive, thick and full, nothing like the sparse facial hair of her own people. She giggles at the texture, pulls her hand back, runs away laughing. The morning passes in this way, to groups of humans slowly becoming comfortable with each other's presence. They sit together on the sand, not mixing, but no longer maintaining such careful distance. They watch each other openly now, curiosity overcoming caution. The Spanish sailors marvel at how the local people move, how they sit, how they interact with each other. The local people marvel at the Spanish clothing, the metal tools, the strangeness of pale skin that burns red in the sun. Columbus attempts to ask questions through gestures. He points, Vest raises his eyebrows in inquiry. Is there more land? Are there cities? Gold? The young man who first approached understands the gesture, if not the specific question. He points west, nods, speaks at length in his own language. Columbus understands nothing of the words but grasps that yes, there is more land, there are other places, other people. The world does not end at this beach. He tries to ask about rulers, about kings or emperors. He pantomimes a crown, points to himself and tries to convey hierarchy, authority. The young man watches, confused, then seems to understand something. He gestures to an older man in the group, speaks a word that might mean leader or elder or simply respected person. The older man comes forward, dignified, moving with the confidence of someone accustomed to deference. Columbus bows slightly, showing respect. The older man inclines his head in return. Through this older man, through gestures and patience, Columbus learns fragments of information. There are other islands nearby, some larger, some smaller. There are other peoples, some friendly with this group, some not. There are resources, fish and fruit and game. There is no gold visible, no evidence of the wealth Columbus hoped to find, but perhaps it exists elsewhere, perhaps on other islands or the mainland, wherever that might be. The sun climbs toward noon, becoming brutally hot. The local people seem comfortable, adapted to the climate, but the Spanish sailors are suffering. Their heavy European clothing is completely unsuited to this environment. Sweat pours from them, soaking their shirts, making their skin itch and chafe. Some remove their outer layers, scandalizing themselves with their own immodesty, but the relief is too great to care about propriety. The local people watch this with something like pity or amusement. One woman approaches a suffering sailor, touches his forehead, feels the heat of his skin. She speaks to the others, shakes her head, then gestures for him to follow. She leads him to the tree line, to the shade, shows him how to sit, how to position himself to catch what little breeze exists. She brings him water in a coconut shell, water that is cool and slightly sweet, drawn from some source in the forest. The sailor drinks gratefully, understanding that he is being cared for, being taught how to survive in this place. The afternoon brings a subtle shift in the dynamic. The initial wariness has faded. The two groups have achieved a kind of peaceful coexistence, not friendship exactly, but mutual acceptance. They share food, the Spanish offering dried fish and hardtack, the local people offering fruit and roots and fresh fish caught that morning. The tastes are strange to each group, but everyone eats, recognizing the gesture of sharing as universal. Language remains a barrier, but a permeable one. Certain words begin to have meaning. The local word for water becomes clear through repetition and context. The Spanish word for ship is adopted, transformed into something that fits local phonology. Numbers are attempted, fingers held up and counted, one language trying to map onto another. It is slow, imperfect, but communication is happening at some level below words. As the sun begins to descend, both groups seem to recognize that this first day of contact is ending. The local people begin to gather their belongings, preparing to return to wherever they came from. The Spanish sailors prepare to return to their ships. There is no formal goodbye, no ceremony. They simply begin to separate, drifting apart as naturally as they came together. But before they fully separate, there are small moments, final exchanges. The young man who first approached Columbus takes off a woven bracelet he wears on his wrist. It is simple, made from plant fibers dyed in natural colors, red and brown and cream. He holds it out to Columbus, an offering, a gift, a gesture of something. Columbus accepts it, moved in a way he does not fully understand. In return, he removes a small silver medallion he wears, a religious object, an image of the Virgin Mary. He offers it to the young man, who accepts it with similar gravity. They look at each other for a long moment, these two men who cannot speak to each other. who come from worlds so different they might as well be from different planets. But in this moment, they are simply two humans, recognizing each other's humanity, acknowledging that despite all differences, something fundamental is shared. They nod to other, then turn away. The ships remain anchored for several more days, long enough for a routine to establish itself. Each morning, the Spanish sailors go ashore, and each morning, the local people emerge from the forest to meet them. The encounters become familiar, comfortable, less marked by uncertainty. They have learned each other's rhythms, learned that neither group intends harm, learned that coexistence is possible even without true understanding. Columbus spends these days exploring the coastline, taking the small boats to investigate nearby coves and inlets. He is looking for something specific, though he cannot quite name what. Evidence of civilization, perhaps. Cities, ports, structures that would confirm this is Asia, that his voyage has succeeded in its stated purpose. But he finds only more beaches, more forests, more pristine coastline unmarked by human construction on any significant scale. The local people live lightly on this land. Their settlements are small, temporary, structures made from wood and thatch that could be dismantled and moved with minimal effort. They leave few permanent marks, take what they need from the environment without fundamentally altering it. To European eyes, accustomed to stone buildings and cleared fields and landscapes transformed by agriculture, this looks like wilderness, like land that is unused, unclaimed, available. But it is none of those things. It is home, carefully managed, deeply known. Columbus sketches maps in his journal, attempting to capture the shape of the coastline, the location of islands, the patterns of wind and current. But his maps are guesses, approximations limited by his confusion about where he actually is. He draws what he sees but labels it as though it were somewhere else, marking these islands as the outer reaches of Asia, giving them names that connect them to his expectations rather than their reality. On the fourth day, the older man who seems to be a leader brings Columbus inland, gesturing that he wants to show him something. Columbus accepts, bringing several sailors with him, all armed, all cautious despite the friendliness they have experienced. They follow a narrow path into the forest, ducking under vines, pushing aside enormous leaves, walking through green dimness that feels ancient and alive. The forest is nothing like European forests. The trees are different species, growing in different patterns, hosting different life. Everything is larger, more abundant, more varied. Flowers bloom in impossible colors, red so deep they are almost black, purples that seem to glow, yellows bright as sunlight. Birds flash through the canopy overhead, their plumage exotic beyond anything in Spanish experience. Insects hum and click and buzz, creating a constant background sound that is overwhelming at first, then gradually becomes almost soothing. They walk for perhaps half an hour, not far in distance but slow going through the dense vegetation. Then the forest opens into a clearing, and Columbus sees what the older man wanted to show him. A village, perhaps 20 structures, built from wood and palm fronds, arranged in a loose circle around a central open area. Cook fires burn in front of several houses, smoke rising lazily in the still air. Children play in the clearing, their games incomprehensible, but their laughter universal. Women work, weaving or preparing food or performing tasks that Columbus cannot identify. The village is not what Columbus expected. It is not primitive in the sense of being crude or desperate. Everything is well made, functional, suited to the climate and needs of the people. The houses provide shelter from rain and sun while allowing air to flow through. The tools are efficient, designed through generations of use and refinement. The social organization is clear, people moving through their tasks with the ease of long practice, everyone knowing their role, their responsibilities. Columbus and his men are invited to sit in the central area. Women bring them food, fruit and fish and the bread made from cassava root. Children gather to stare, no longer shy, touching the Spanish clothing, the metal buckles, the leather boots. The Spanish sailors try to appear relaxed, but they are outnumbered here. Deep in unfamiliar territory, completely dependent on the goodwill of their hosts. It is a vulnerable position, one that makes them understand their own fragility in this new world. The older man speaks at length, his words accompanied by gestures, by drawings made in the dirt with a stick. Columbus understands fragments. There are many islands, stretching in chains across the sea. Some are small, some are large. People move between them in boats, trading, visiting, maintaining connections. This village is one of many, part of a network, a civilization that exists outside European awareness or recognition. Columbus tries to explain where he comes from, pointing east across the ocean, trying to convey the vast distance he has traveled. The older man listens, nods, but his expression suggests he does not quite believe it. The ocean is too large, the distance too great. Surely these strangers came from some nearer land, some place just beyond the horizon. The idea that they crossed the entire ocean, sailed for weeks through empty water, seems fantastical, impossible. They try to learn each other's languages with more dedication now. The local people teach words for basic things: tree, water, fish, sun, moon. The Spanish teach their own words in return. Progress is slow, frustrating, but real. Certain concepts begin to have labels that both sides recognize. They are building a bridge, word by word, gesture by gesture, across the chasm of mutual incomprehension. Columbus shows them European objects, trying to impress, to demonstrate the sophistication of his civilization. He shows them a metal sword, the blade catching sunlight, sharp enough to cut through thick rope with ease. The local people examine it with interest, but not awe. They have their own weapons, wooden clubs edged with sharp stones, spears with fire-hardened points. Different materials, different techniques, but equally effective for their purposes. He shows them a mirror, a small round piece of polished glass that reflects faces with perfect clarity. This does impress them. They have seen their reflections in still water, but never with such precision. They pass the mirror around, each person staring at themselves, some laughing, some touching their own faces to verify that the image matches reality. It is a moment of delight, of wonder, and Columbus feels a flash of satisfaction. He has brought something new into their world. But then he realizes something. In return, they show him plants that heal, that soothe pain, that treat infections. They show him how to find fresh water in places that look completely dry. They show him which fruits are safe to eat and which are poisonous. They show him how to weave rope from plant fibers, how to make fire without flint and steel, how to navigate by stars he does not know. They have knowledge, vast stores of it, accumulated over generations, perfectly suited to this environment. His mirror is clever, but their knowledge is survival. Days pass in this way, each side teaching, learning, slowly building understanding. The Spanish sailors begin to shed their European assumptions. They realize that these people are not primitive, not simple, not inferior. They are different, living in ways adapted to a different environment. But their intelligence, their creativity, their social complexity is evident. They have medicine, astronomy, agriculture, art, music, spirituality. All the markers of civilization, just expressed in forms that do not match European templates. Columbus begins to understand, slowly, reluctantly, that he is not in Asia. The evidence is overwhelming once he allows himself to see it. The people are not Chinese or Indian or any nationality described by Marco Polo. The plants are completely unfamiliar. The geography makes no sense according to any existing map. He has not found a new route to known lands. He has found something else entirely, something that was not supposed to exist. This realization settles over him gradually, not as a sudden revelation, but as a slow, uncomfortable certainty. He has discovered new lands, but in doing so, he has failed his mission. He promised a route to Asia. He promised access to spices and silk and the wealth of the East. Instead, he has found islands inhabited by people who have never heard of the Great Khan, who have no gold to speak of, who cannot offer the trade goods that would justify this expensive expedition. He sits alone one evening on the beach, watching the sun set over water that he now knows does not lead to China. The sky turns orange and pink and purple, colors so vivid they seem unreal. The ocean is calm, reflecting the sunset like polished metal. It is beautiful, achingly beautiful, and utterly useless to his purposes. He has sailed across the world and arrived nowhere that matters to the Spanish crown, nowhere that will make him rich or famous or vindicated. But something else is happening, something he does not fully grasp. The knowledge of these islands, of these people, of this land that was not supposed to exist, is returning with him to Europe. Maps will be redrawn. Assumptions will be challenged. The confident certainty that Europeans had about the shape and size of the world will crumble. This voyage will change everything, not because Columbus found what he sought, but because he found what no one imagined was there to be found. The local people do not know this. They cannot know that their world is about to become visible to another world, that their existence is about to be recorded in European chronicles, that maps will soon mark their islands with European names. They continue their lives, fishing and farming and raising children, living in the eternal present tense that characterizes human existence everywhere. The future is unknowable, so they do not worry about it. The present is sufficient, filled with work and rest, joy and sorrow, the ordinary texture of human life. Columbus makes the decision to leave. He has gathered information, made sketches, collected samples of plants and fruits. He has met the inhabitants, established peaceful relations, claimed the land formally for Spain. There is no reason to stay longer, and many reasons to return. His crew is restless, eager to see home, to tell their stories, to claim the rewards they believe they have earned. The ships need repairs, the supplies are running low, and winter is approaching. It is time to go. The farewell is quiet, undramatic. The local people gather on the beach to watch the ships prepare to leave. The Spanish sailors wave from the decks, calling out words in a mixture of Spanish and the local language, a pidgin that has developed over these few days of contact. The local people wave back, their expressions difficult to read. Relief, perhaps, that these strange visitors are leaving. Sadness, maybe, at the loss of novelty and excitement. Curiosity about whether the strangers will return. The anchors are raised, the sails unfurled. The wind catches the canvas, and the ships begin to move, pulling away from the shore. Columbus stands at the stern, watching the island recede. Watching the people on the beach become smaller, less distinct, eventually invisible. He is leaving, but he knows he will return. This discovery, accidental and confusing as it is too significant to abandon. Others will come, more ships, more men, more attempts to understand and exploit and claim this new world. The voyage home takes weeks, sailing east now, back toward the rising sun. Back toward the old world that suddenly seems older, more limited, less certain. The sailors talk endlessly about what they have seen, embellishing the stories, already transforming experience into myth. The islands become more exotic in the retelling, the people more strange, the potential wealth more vast. Memory is already distorting reality, shaping it into something more dramatic, more significant, more worthy of the risk they took. Columbus writes his reports, choosing his words carefully. He does not admit confusion or failure. He presents the voyage as a success, the islands as valuable, the potential for wealth and conversion as enormous. He knows that truth is less important than perception, that his future depends on how this voyage is interpreted by people who were not there, who will never see these islands, who will judge based on words alone. The ships arrive in Spain in early spring, sliding into familiar harbours, docking at familiar piers. The crews disembark, kissing the ground, weeping with relief and joy. They have survived, crossed the ocean twice, seen lands no European has seen, returned to tell the tale. They are heroes in their own minds, explorers who have pushed back the boundaries of the known world. They do not yet understand what they have unleashed. News spreads slowly at first, then faster, rippling out from the ports to the cities to the courts. Columbus presents himself to the Spanish monarchs, tells his story, shows his sketches and samples. Ferdinand and Isabella listen, intrigued but skeptical. They had hoped for a route to Asia, not new islands inhabited by unknown peoples. But they recognize the potential, see the possibilities. Understand that something significant has happened, even if its full meaning remains unclear. Other nations hear the news and react with interest, skepticism, envy. Portugal, England, France, all the Maritaus beginned. If Columbus found islands to the west, what else might be out there? The ocean suddenly seems less like a barrier and more like a highway, a route to unknown possibilities. Ships begin to prepare for their own voyages, their own explorations, their own attempts to claim whatever lies beyond the horizon. The world does not change overnight. Columbus returns to Spain, tells his story, presents his findings, and life continues much as it did before. The farmers still plough their fields. The merchants still haggle in marketplaces. The nobles still plot and scheme in their courts. For most people in Europe, the news of distant islands means nothing, changes nothing, affects nothing in their daily existence. They have never seen the ocean, will never travel beyond their home province, and care only about harvests and taxes and whether their children will survive another winter. But in certain rooms, in certain circles, something is shifting. Cartographers gather around tables, studying Columbus's sketches, trying to reconcile them with existing maps, trying to understand how these new lands fit into the known world. They debate and argue, erasing lines, drawing new ones, creating maps that look less certain than before, more tentative, marked with questions and speculation. The world is becoming larger and stranger with each stroke of their pens. Scholars read the reports with intense interest, comparing them to classical texts, to the writings of ancient geographers who describe the shape and size of the earth. Ptolemy's calculations suddenly seem less reliable. Aristotle's confident assertions about what lies beyond the Pillars of Hercules seem premature. Knowledge that was considered settled, permanent, absolute begins to feel provisional, temporary, subject to revision. The foundation of certainty is cracking. The Church responds cautiously, unsure how to interpret these discoveries. New lands mean new peoples, souls that have never heard the Christian message. Children of God living in ignorance of salvation. This presents both opportunity and challenge. Opportunity for conversion, for expanding the reach of Christianity to places previously unknown. Challenge to existing theology, to the narratives about human origins and dispersal. If these people descended from Adam and Eve, how did they reach these distant islands? When did they separate from the rest of humanity? Why are they not mentioned in Scripture? Columbus himself becomes a curious figure, celebrated but also questioned, praised but also doubted. Some see him as a visionary, a man who dared to sail into the unknown and returned with proof that the world is larger than anyone imagined. Others see him as a lucky fool, a man who miscalculated badly. sailed west expecting to reach east, and stumbled onto lands that just happened to be there. Both assessments are partly true, and Columbus knows this, carries this knowledge like a weight. He plans another voyage, more ambitious, better funded with more ships and more men. The Spanish crown, despite initial skepticism, has decided to invest in these new discoveries. If these islands are not Asia, they might still have value. There might be gold, silver, spices, resources worth exploiting. And if nothing else, claiming them prevents other nations from doing so. Maintains Spain's position in the emerging competition for overseas territory. But Columbus will not be alone in these waters for long. Other explorers are already preparing their own expeditions. Inspired by his success, determined to find their own routes, their own lands, their own glory. The ocean, once considered an impassable barrier, is becoming a frontier, a space of possibility and danger, adventure and profit. Ships are being built, crews are being assembled, investors are risking their wealth on voyages into the unknown. In the islands themselves, life continues with a different kind of change beginning. The people who met Columbus tell their stories to others. Describe the strange visitors with their pale skin and elaborate clothing and metal tools. The stories spread from village to village, from island to island, carried by traders and travelers. Some people believe the stories. Others think they are exaggerations, myths, entertaining fictions. But everyone is curious, wondering if the strangers will return, wondering what it might mean if they do. The older man who led Columbus to his village sits by a fire one evening, looking at the silver medallion he received, the image of the Virgin Mary gleaming in the firelight. He does not understand what it represents, does not know the religious significance, sees only an image of a woman holding a child, a universal symbol that transcends culture. He wonders about the man who gave it to him, wonders where he came from, whether his stories about crossing the ocean were true. It seems impossible, but then many true things seem impossible at first. The young man who first approached Columbus on the beach wears the brass bell on a cord around his neck. He rings it sometimes, enjoying the sound, showing it to others who admire its clarity, its brightness. It has become a treasured possession, a mark of status, proof that he was brave enough to approach the strangers first. He tells his story often, how he walked up to the bearded man, how they tried to speak, how they exchanged gifts. In the telling, the encounter becomes more dramatic, more meaningful, slowly transforming from mundane reality into legend. Years pass, measured differently by different peoples. The Spanish count them precisely, recording dates and tracking time with calendars inherited from the Romans. The island peoples count them more loosely, marking seasons and generations, remembering events in relation to other events rather than abstract numbers. But time passes for everyone, carrying them forward into a future that none of them can see clearly. More ships arrive, as Columbus predicted. Not just Spanish ships, but Portuguese, English, French, Dutch. The ocean fills with sails, with competing expeditions, with men seeking fortune and glory and escape from their old lives. Some treat the island peoples with respect, attempt trade and peaceful coexistence. Others bring violence and disease, enslavement and exploitation. The encounter that began peacefully on that first beach does not remain peaceful everywhere. History is rarely gentle for long. The islands are mapped, named, claimed, divided among European powers who have no right to them except the right of force. The names Columbus gave them appear on official documents, replacing names that had existed for centuries, names in languages that Europeans do not bother to learn. San Salvador, Hispaniola, Cuba, names that reflect some desires, erasing the indigenous geography, the indigenous understanding of place and belonging. The local populations begin to decline, slowly at first, then catastrophically. European diseases, smallpox and measles and influenza, sweep through communities that have no immunity, no resistance, no defense. Entire villages sicken and die. Children who should have grown to adulthood perish in days. The old stories, the accumulated knowledge of generations, die with the elders who carried them. Languages disappear, cultural practices fade. Whole peoples vanish from the earth, their existence recorded only in the journals of the Europeans who watched them die. Columbus himself dies in Spain in 1506, relatively young, worn down by years of sea travel and political battles. He dies still believing, or claiming to believe, that he found a route to Asia, that the islands he discovered are part of the Indies. He never admits the full truth of what he found, never acknowledges that he accidentally discovered a continent, a new world, a hemisphere that Europeans did not know existed. Perhaps he genuinely never understood. Or perhaps he understood but could not bear to admit his original plan failed. His body is moved several times after death, buried and reburied in different locations, Spain and the Dominican Republic and Cuba. His remains travelling more after death than many people travel in life. His grave becomes a contested site, different places claiming to hold his bones. History fragmenting even in death, certainty dissolving into competing narratives that cannot all be true. The world he left behind continues to change, continues to absorb the implications of his voyage. Maps become more accurate, more detailed as more expeditions return with more information. The coastlines of the Americas are sketched in, the rough shapes of continents emerge. Cartographers begin to understand that Columbus found not islands off the coast of Asia, but entirely separate landmasses, a hemisphere that was not supposed to exist according to ancient geography. This realization transforms everything. The Earth is larger than calculated. Human populations are more diverse than imagined. History is more complex than the simple narratives that placed Europe at the center of all significant events. The world becomes, quite literally, bigger. And with that expansion comes a kind of vertigo, a loss of certainty, a recognition that much of what was considered known was actually speculation, assumption, wishful thinking. European empires expand into this new space, establishing colonies, extracting resources, imposing their languages and religions and economic systems. The peaceful encounter on that first beach is not repeated at scale. Instead, the meeting of worlds becomes violent, exploitative, devastating for the indigenous populations. Millions die from disease and warfare and forced labor. Cultures are destroyed, languages erased, histories forgotten or deliberately suppressed. But something else happens, too, something more complex than simple conquest. The two worlds that met on that beach begin to influence each other, to change each other, in ways that no one intended or predicted. European crops spread to the Americas, wheat and sugar and coffee, transforming landscapes and economies. American crops spread to Europe and Asia and Africa, potatoes and tomatoes and corn and tobacco, changing diets, enabling population growth, reshaping agricultural practices across continents. Ideas travel alongside goods, philosophies, and technologies and artistic traditions mixing and merging and creating something new. The encounter is not a simple story of European dominance, though dominance is certainly part of it. It is also a story of exchange, adaptation, survival, resistance, transformation. The indigenous peoples do not simply disappear or submit. They adapt, preserve what they can, blend their traditions with the new influences, create hybrid cultures that carry forward elements of the past into an uncertain future. Centuries pass. The immediate aftermath of Columbus's voyage fades into history, becomes subject of study and debate, interpreted and reinterpreted by each generation according to their own values and concerns. Columbus himself becomes a contested figure, hero to some, villain to others. Symbol of exploration or exploitation depending on perspective. The truth is probably more complicated than either extreme, more human, more messy, more ambiguous. In the present day, the islands where Columbus first landed are still inhabited, still beautiful, still marked by that first encounter and all that followed. The descendants of the indigenous peoples who met Columbus still live there, joined by descendants of Europeans and Africans and Asians, a diverse population connected by geography and history. The past is not erased, but it is transformed, mixed, combined into something that none of the original participants could have imagined. The question of what Columbus discovered remains complicated. He did not discover America in any absolute sense. People had lived there for thousands of years, had societies and cultures and histories long before any European arrived. He discovered America only for Europeans, only for a worldview that placed Europe at the center and considered anything unknown to Europeans as undiscovered, unclaimed, available for taking. But he did cross the ocean, did make the voyage that connected to hemispheres that had been separate for millennia, did initiate the process that would transform both worlds utterly and irreversibly. The encounter was accidental, confused, small in its immediate effects. Columbus did not conquer anyone that first day. He did not establish a colony or extract gold or convert anyone to Christianity. He simply arrived, met people, exchanged gifts, and left. But from that small beginning, enormous changes flowed. The real discovery was not of land, but of possibility. The discovery that the ocean could be crossed, that the world was larger than known, that other peoples existed beyond European awareness. That certainty was provisional and knowledge was incomplete. These realizations, quiet and internal at first, gradually reshaped how Europeans understood themselves and their place in the world. They became less central, less certain, less convinced that their way of seeing was the only way. This shift in perspective, this opening of imagination to larger possibilities, is perhaps Columbus's true legacy. Not the conquest and exploitation that followed, though those are certainly part of the story, but the simple, profound recognition that the world is bigger than we think, that other ways of living exist, that encounter with difference can expand rather than diminish us. That lesson, learned slowly and imperfectly, continues to resonate centuries later. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, imagine yourself on that beach again. Feel the warm sand beneath you. Hear the gentle waves lapping at the shore. Smell the salt air mixed with the scent of tropical flowers. Two groups of people meet for the first time, nervous but curious, uncertain but peaceful. They cannot speak to each other, cannot fully understand each other, but they recognize something fundamental. We are all human. We all share this world. We all wonder about what lies beyond the horizon. The world changed quietly that day, not with battles or proclamations, but with a meeting, an exchange, a moment of recognition. The world is always changing quietly, in ways we do not notice, through encounters we do not fully understand. History is not made only by great events and famous people. It is made in small moments, on forgotten beaches, by ordinary people trying to make sense of the extraordinary. Rest now, dear listener. Let these images fade gently from your mind. Let the story dissolve into sleep, into dreams of distant shores and endless oceans, of meetings between strangers who become less strange through the simple act of looking at each other with curiosity rather than fear. Let the past recede, let the future wait. There is only this moment, this breath, this soft descent into sleep. The world is large and strange and beautiful, and you are safe here, resting, dreaming, drifting away on currents that carry you gently into the peaceful darkness of sleep. Good night.